focus and it is ramping. Beep, beep, beep. So
Like, there's just so much shit going on. How can you possibly put it all into a coherent sentence? How could you summarize it? I've got a new setup going over the course of the 2 weeks we've kind of had off. I've stolen a softbox from a friend of mine right here. I guess,
appropriated, I believe is the proper term.
yeah, appropriated a
Appropriated
softbox from a friend of mine. And provided I'm
from
using the
a
right,
friend.
and I've got the right inputs, I've got this bougie microphone. Check this shit out. Look at that. That's fantastic. Oh, wonderful. A lamp here, depth, lighting. If I unblur my background, you'll see Agamemnon in the top left corner, right corner, my right, whatever. Anyway, wonderful stuff. Hope our viewers slash listeners enjoy it. If they don't, tell me to tear it down. I'll light myself by oil lamp slash candle light and just do like a Barry Lyndon and just like open my lens a shitload. That might look nicer. Who knows? Sorry, I digress. Today I thought we could talk about focal length. A few interesting things happening here because it's obviously really complicated. I think to keep things simple, I reckon we should do like the basic kind of like what do certain lengths evoke? How do certain practitioners use them? What are the bare bones like traditional rules if they exist? And then to close that off, when I asked you about this, you mentioned you'd had like a bit of a crisis where you listened to my suggestion that we talk about focal length and thought, that's boring. That's a boring topic. And everyone does it differently. And I think we should really get into that. Like, why is it boring? Why does everyone do it differently? What's the difference between that and other techniques?
I guess kind of my standard flippant response to questions like that is either it depends,
It depends.
or in this case, I'm gonna go with how much time we got.
How much time we got? We got 40 minutes? How long was the meeting?
To be honest, I'm not entirely sure where that kind of, because that was kind of like a gut level, didn't even think about it, wasn't even conscious reaction, and kind of, trying to pick that apart a little bit more. I think part of it is there is a bit more to it than most people think.
As there usually is. I mean,
I personally don't believe that there is a kind of simple causality relationship. Focal length X means Y. And I think maybe because of that, it is easy when we first start out to kind of look like for how do I choose a lens? I don't know where to start. Rule X, Y, Z says, okay, so I'm going to start there. Or on the flip side, my hero, X whomever, uses this focal length for whatever. So that's where I'm going to start. Or you end up in a situation where it's a roll of the dice. Particularly, very often when we start out with zoom lenses. So it's kind of easy to go with whatever the zoom happens. And that right there, did you notice the ramping of the exposure? So it's not a zoom.
oh yeah, it's getting darker and exposing how bad my
Sure
skin is.
does. Sure does. And did you also notice
Really dramatic.
the focus ramped as well does not hold focus. So is it a varifocal or is it a zoom?
Oh shit. A zoom? Wait, did we? Don't you mean very focal and parfocal?
So a varifocal is not parfocal. Whereas
Yeah,
a
so it
zoom
could be.
is.
This is a parfocal lens.
No, it's not, because it's not holding focus and it is ramping. Beep, beep, beep. So, note to self, timestamp editing to do for Kim.
Timestamp editing, loads of swearing.
Yeah.
Very focal.
Yeah, so I think in that regard, it's if we're not paying attention when we first start out, it's easy to kind of just whatever this focal length on the lens happens to be is what we go with, and then
Literally, that was how it was.
yeah. Why this question now at this stage of experience and knowledge for you?
I mean, first off, I'm going to start with like spouting out all the stuff you were just kind of decrying. I'll give you what I've heard so
Mm-hmm.
far about focal length. And this is all very, very like Gen Z knowledge acquisition, like it's from YouTube and podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, oh, this does that. That's crazy. I'll give you my basic understanding based on what I've
Uh-huh.
heard from YouTube and podcasts, which are obviously notorious for making these things a lot more palatable and accessible and like, kind of diminishing some information. The wider the focal length, the bigger the something looks if it's closer. The longer the focal length, the less apparent most like depth is. Everything is flattened to like the singular plane. Obviously, you have to be further away if you're using a longer focal length because they capture less in more detail, depending on what sensor size you're using. There's a whole thing going on. In terms of like artistic, the word merit of all of these things, you've got kind of a more dreamlike effect given by like particularly long focal lengths with very, very intense bokeh in the background, like very, very shallow depths of field. And then wider focal lengths have a kind of now I know what you're talking about because I can't put it all into words. Like there's so much shit going on with all of this stuff. Like they have different depths of field, they capture less or more, they have more of an effect on foreshortening and like depth in general. Like there's just so much shit going on. How can you possibly put it all into a coherent sentence? How could you summarize it?
Just to throw another wrinkle in there, a lot of the rendering of space also depends on the viewing size.
Viewing size, like the monitor, or
Where and how are you viewing this image?
so if I were to use, like the EVF monitor on the camera or something, how would that affect my understanding of the space that's being captured? That's a you didn't know moment. I didn't know that.
I can give you a technical proof.
Mm.
So remember we discussed focal lengths in terms of what is a normal lens. Do you remember the definition of a normal lens?
A normal lens.
As opposed to a wide angle or telephoto.
As in like kind of the default lens, the middleman situation, or
Mm-hmm. Do you remember the technical definition of a normal lens?
no? It's probably in my notes somewhere.
Technical definition of a normal lens is a focal length that is equal to the diagonal of the sensor.
Oh. Oh.
So, for example, a
Mm.
full frame sensor, a traditional 36 by 24 millimeters, has an image diagonal of about 43 millimeters, which is why we've ended up with the 50 millimeter lens as the normal lens for that format.
Okay.
Micro Four Thirds sensor, you're looking at just shy of 22 millimeters.
Mm.
So pretty much almost exactly half the diagonal of a full frame. So the normal lens for that format would be about 25 millimeters.
And then with a full frame sensor, you've got like, is the diagonal like around 60 millimeters?
No. The full frame was, I just said it, 43 millimeters.
Why didn't you just say the 35?
No, I said 43.
Oh, God, I thought you said the 35. Sorry. Oh my God.
No, I said the sensor size of the traditional full frame is 36 by 24, which gives a diagonal of
so
about 43.
I was caught up by the fact that I remember us having this conversation and I remember taking notes. I think I might not have been at the understanding sensor size level. There's a very, very good chance that I'll look in my book and I'll be full of question marks, I think, because I only got a hang of sensor size a couple months ago, and I still feel like there's so much I don't know. I genuinely feel as though we probably spoke about that, and I was going like, clueless.
That's how the crop factor is derived. It's literally take diagonal of the format you're converting to and dividing by the format you're comparing to. Super 35, traditional 4-perf Super 35, has an image diagonal of about 28 millimeters. But because motion picture tends to be magnified much, much larger than stills, it was decided to go with a longer focal length because of the greater magnification in viewing size. So technically, if you go by the
35?
textbook definition, then a normal lens for Super 35 should be 27 and 28. But we have landed on 50 millimeters because of the greater magnification.
So full frame and Super 35 have the same normal focal length?
Correct. At least when you compare stills in something like newspaper, magazine, or reasonably medium to small poster versus a big size cinema screen.
How is that affecting our monitoring? Like, how is that affecting the amount of space captured according to the monitor, like you were saying earlier?
The amount of space is always the same, but how we perceive it is different.
Oh man, how's that?
Well, think about it. If you watch a YouTube video on your phone, is it easier or more difficult to tell whether they're using shallow depth of field compared to watching the same clip on a big cinema screen?
Right. Okay. Yeah. Definitely more difficult. Like the greater the magnification of the image, the greater a sense of like space and the effect on space you have, I think.
Yep.
Just because you're literally surrounded by it at a certain point, so it's just you're more aware of it. I think my memory was erased by the you didn't know moment. The second we hit that, I was in a completely different mindset.
I think it really depends on a bit of a kind of what is the core of your aesthetic. For me, I consider my style cinematic, and I know I went there and used the C word, which I generally don't like using because it's not very well defined. So let me give my definition. My definition of cinematic is an image that is designed for viewing on a big screen. And I think there are two kind of reasons why I've ended up there. Part of it, I think, is way back in childhood. Do you ever use a Viewmaster, a stereo viewer? You know,
No
the
clue.
red kind of... No? Go and Google it. Do it right now.
Okay, we'll do.
So this is kind of, I guess, an extremely early version of VR goggles, but with still images only.
Oh, I've used one of these. Yeah, the little click,
Yep. Which is an extremely immersive experience, isn't it? It's like you feel like everything else is blocked out.
It's mind-blowing.
Everything else is kind of like this magnified, huge fantasy world.
It's like those optometrist tests, when you sit down on the machine and they show you the light, the hot air balloon. Yeah. The image of the hot air balloon they show you in optometrist?
No optometrist that showed me any. Usually just letters of different sizes.
There's a real contrast happening here where like you're saying really, really important stuff about focal length, and then I'm butting in being like, when you go to the optometrist and they show you that picture of the hot air balloon.
The second one is optical viewfinders in film cameras. And there was one in particular that had a larger magnification than others, which made, again, the image like really kind of fill my field of vision. And so from that, it's kind of like that's where I'm imagining my images going. So how do I feel and see space on that scale? That's kind of my benchmark.
So your style, like the cinematic style, the way that you're defining it is like the way that you personally prefer to shoot things is designed for an environment where viewing is happening in a way that completely immerses the viewer's vision. Like it is basically the only thing they're looking at, regardless of if that's a big screen up close or a very, very small thing very, very close, like with a Viewmaster or a viewfinder. Appears large, yeah.
And I think for me, I can kind of tell in a lot of images when that has been the parameter, so to speak, even if I watch them on the phone. There are certain images where you can go, yeah, that's okay, not bad, but they're truly, really going to come to life on a big immersive screen.
Oh, okay. I guess you could say the same thing about just the way it's composed. Like, there are a lot of movies.
For example, I've heard
editors say
that editors say that they edit at a different pace for IMAX.
Is that because you don't want to cut too much if your viewer is going like having to scan the whole thing to like get the whole image? Yeah.
Yep.
I'm a huge fan of those big blockbusters that are shot obviously for a cinema because they have like infinite rewatch value if you want to sit there and just kind of go like, I didn't see the bottom left of the screen, that guy. It's obviously been designed for a large screen. There's a specific movie that I will not name, obviously designed for a large screen, and the director said at one point that if you watch it on a small screen at home, it's like putting a speedboat in a bathtub.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm saying. Like, I can read it, It speaks to me on this size, but it doesn't truly come alive and speak with its own voice until it's that size.
So how would you say that style informs your choice of focal length then?
There is something that yeah, because it is really only something that has coalesced and I'm starting to be able to put into words in the last 4 or 5 years.
Okay, let's try it. Let's try it.
So there, and it's going to be a little bit difficult, unfortunately, without visuals. But as I go along, try it for yourself.
Yeah, just close your eyes and think real hard.
Now, this is more like get your hands on a camera, lenses, and the biggest screen you can get access to viewing images on.
Okay, all right. Buy a projector.
So there is something that I've started calling a cinematic volume, and that's a combination of focal length and depth of field. So think like whatever space we've got in front of us for the camera, depending on our choice of focal length and depth of field within that space, there is a volume that is kind of in focus where our attention sits, right? Where I've ended up is the focal length choice isn't independent of f-stop, as in the two go together because of that.
Is that
volume.
because of the effect on depth of field? Yeah.
There is what I describe as the traditional lens plan and the inverted lens plan.
May I have a crack at guessing what they are?
Uh-huh.
Traditional lens plan is as you get closer up, you lengthen your focal length. And as you move further away for wides and masters, you shorten your focal length. An inverted one is using wider lenses for closer shots and longer lenses for further away shots, or just wider lenses overall. I know that I think most practitioners I'm aware of that use wide lenses for close-ups actually just don't use long lenses much at all, from what I've seen. But
actually, a lot of philosophy and politics attached to it. I know a lot of documentary filmmakers, particularly of the cinema verite tradition and persuasion, who consider longer focal lengths to be bourgeois and not of the people, as in elitist.
I see. All right. That's
So
I can see where that comes from. I mean,
there is a group of filmmakers, at least there was at one point in movie history, who considered something like focal length choice a political statement.
wow.
Bradford Young, who shot Arrival and the Han Solo movie.
Solo. Solo, a Star Wars story. Sorry. TM.
For him, it's political as well.
Wow.
He tends to favor wider lenses for close-ups. It's interesting. There's an interview on Cook TV, so Cook, the lens makers. There's a bit of a backstory to that, how Bradford Young is talking about the African American protest movements of the 1950s, 1960s, etc., and how he's kind of seeing a lot of male African Americans at the time in newspapers in particular, any photos of male African Americans would be shot on a longer lens. And he's kind of equating that with saying, well, most of the press photographers at the time would be white, male Caucasian, and they tended to choose a longer focal length for male African Americans because they wanted to keep their physical distance.
Okay, you know, I see where that's coming from. Not that, the Bradford Young thing, the political element of it. That's a pretty
So for
disturbing
that reason,
observation.
he wants to be more inclusive for his close-ups. He wants to be physically closer with the camera.
Oh, okay. So it's almost like a trust thing. He's kind of establishing
Yeah,
a trust between him and his cast and crew by saying, I want to be close.
Or I'm comfortable being close, as opposed to what he saw from the press photography of the protest movement, where these male Caucasian photographers, at least in his mind, because I don't know the intention and feelings and backgrounds of any of these photographers, kind of were less comfortable being physically close.
So we've got, that's completely new to me. I've never thought about inverted and traditional lens choices being a political statement to some. That's new. I was literally thinking to myself earlier today, going, so much of film is art, which is inherently political, but can you touch on politics when talking about the technical elements of that art, especially like when you talk about cinematography. And I was thinking, oh, surely not. And then here we are. I've never considered that.
Again, you kind of got to go back to considering where is the core of your aesthetic, what defines
Mm,
it.
mm,
So
mm.
for filmmakers, I've seen interviews with Roger Deakins, where he's saying this was earlier in his career, around about the kind of late 90s, early noughts, where he favored wider angle lenses for close-ups because, again, he as well wanted to be physically closer.
I think we've spoken about this because I remember listening to his podcast recently and hearing him say that his traditional, like, I remember saying he said that his choice of focal length was the traditional range where he was further away for close-ups. And that was kind of strange because it had obviously changed since then.
Yeah, what I'm seeing with that, and I think we've seen it for a while with Emmanuel Lubezki as well, who in some
Mm,
quarters has been
mm.
considered the pioneer of reintroducing wider angles, extreme wide angle lenses in
It
some
looks
cases
great
for
as well.
close-ups.
It's like, makes sense.
Again, I believe, I don't know, but I believe that's to do with the physical distance. Whereas for me, I'm less concerned about the physical distance on set
Mm,
than I am
mm.
about the feeling of the space.
Circle back. How has that idea of the volume and how much of that volume you want to capture, how has that informed your own choices? Like what would you say are the trends of your use of focal length? Do you have any
I know,
trends?
I know it when I see it.
Oh, okay.
I know when it's there, and I know when it's not there.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of it has been consuming a lot of images, but keeping track of focal length and f-stop. Okay, that's what I'm after. What's the focal length? What's the
Ah.
f-stop? What's the shot size? So it's the relationship between shot size, because that defines the distance
Mm, mm.
on a given focal length.
This is good. This is going well. Sorry, this is definitely not. This is editable content, but I think this conversation's going well.
Damn you! Don't jinx it. You're
Sorry.
tempting fate.
Okay.
This is one of those worst things you can say on a set.
Yeah, I know. I know.
Like the number one bad thing do not ever say on set
This is going well.
is we're ahead of schedule.
Mm, mm.
And the second variation of that is we're doing great time wise. Oh no,
Great,
don't do
guys.
it, man.
Wow.
Did we ever do my exercise that I call see in glass?
I don't remember doing it, but I also have a very bad memory, so I could look through my notes and find out.
Photo sharing sites for photo enthusiasts and photographers.
Mm.
Like Flickr, 500 pics, etc., etc., etc. A lot of
Oh, is this
those.
the one we go on one of these sites, like 500 pics, and just like pick an image,
Uh-huh.
figure out its f-stop and focal length and shot size and everything, just by
Yep.
looking at it, and then check the metadata and see if it's actually correct?
Yep.
Yes, I don't think we had a name. I don't think you had a name for it back then because I don't remember you calling it seeing glass. But I've done that a fair few times. It's pretty good. It still stumps me every single time though. I'm really bad at it.
But a lot of it has come from things like that. Kind of like images go like, yeah, I like the space of that. And then go and check. And it kind of falls in line with more or less an inverted lens plan.
Mm.
Now, are you ready for the second you didn't know you didn't know? So on
Okay.
that cliffhanger, we'll be back.
I had to catch you on that one. I'm sorry.
You did
This
indeed.
keeps happening. For reference, we had an entire conversation last time that went for like roughly 45 minutes, and we didn't record a second of it. Not
It was
one ounce.
marvelous. It was the
It
best
was
ever. Actually,
literally
do you know Tenacious D?
the Jack Black
Jack Black,
band. That's
yeah.
all I know about it. Yeah,
Oh, okay. Check out the song Tribute.
tribute. Tenacious D. It just remind.
Not right
We figured
now.
out not right now. Not right now. I'll just put it in my Google now. Um, we actually figured out the meaning of life and everything. Like we found out all of these important things, and we're like
The
sobbing by the end of the
the
conversation.
perfect focal length for life.
We actually
But it
figured out.
but it's not on record, so does not exist.
Guys, we actually figured out how to reduce noise in camera permanently forever. We figured out how to actually counteract all noise when shooting in low light. It was ridiculous.
A lot of what we've spoken about in terms of the focal lengths is not so much emotion as it is about space, right? Regardless of focal lengths, there are design and engineering elements of a lens that can drastically change how they render depth. So there is a concept called roundness. How round does a lens render?
I'm not even going to try to guess what that means. I was turning it over in my head, and I was like, I am going to sound like a moron if I try to guess any of what this means.
I'm just looking around to see if I've got anything to demonstrate with. I don't think I do.
Looking around?
Consider on a two-dimensional image, if you consider a ball or a disc, how do you know whether it is a ball or a disc on a two-dimensional image?
Oh, man. That's a really good point. I mean, all I can say is one of them has a sense of roundness.
Exactly.
And one of them doesn't. Right. Okay.
Round.
Roundness.
So,
okay, I'm gonna make a wild guess.
Not like that. Not like that kind of roundness.
That.
But that
hand movement.
Kind of roundness.
That kind of roundness. Okay, I'm gonna make a wild guess as to a basic thing here. I think that wider lenses capture more roundness.
That's not what we're talking about. So I was saying before, regardless of focal length.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a good point. You just said that like 5 minutes ago. That's true. That's true.
Interesting thing here is initially when I stumbled across the description of it, I could really only tell by comparison side by side. Like, does this lens give more or less roundness than another lens I'm showing immediately after? However, the difference is much more obvious on a bigger screen.
As it would be, yeah.
And what I have found is there seems to be a correlation with distortion and perceived. I'm not sure whether this is going to be explaining it or not, or whether I'm just going to put out some myths that are going to be impossible to undo later on. We'll see.
Ooh, okay.
But I find that the rounder lenses that I've come across tend to have more optical artifacts that are considered of lower quality lenses.
And what are those optical artifacts? What would you say is the...
So there tends to be more edge distortion.
Lower quality lens. Lower edge distortion? Wait, more or less,
no,
sorry?
There tends to be more edge distortion. I've also seen in a lot of these lenses a bit more, certainly cheaper ones that have got good roundness. Some of the more expensive ones that have got good roundness are out of battery. Some of the cheaper brands that I've come across where I like the roundness have definitely shown a lot more chromatic aberration. They tend to be lower contrast, but I'm not sure whether that's just coincidence or not. And very often, contrast in lenses goes hand in hand with perceived sharpness. So although technically by measurement, two lenses may be able to render the same resolution, contrast and perceived sharpness tend to go hand in hand in lenses. So two lenses might be able to resolve the same amount of detail, but if one lens has got higher contrast, i.e. the shadows, the dark areas are darker, we tend to perceive it as being sharper. Yeah, I mean, there are certain lens brands that are famed for being very contrasty. And I think part of this, getting a better understanding of that is to do more comparative lens tests. So I'm wondering how much of this do you think, like your kind of, how much of it do you think is to do with having a limited exposure to different lenses?
Oh, all of it. I've only used two brands of lenses ever.
Hmm.
If you don't count the one that I'm using right now.
Yeah.
Uh, and I could not tell you what they do different. I mean, I'm aware that like I don't know, the Sigma lenses that we use had a greenish yellow look when compared to the Canon ones, and that was it. That was the like it was also practicality for me. Like the Sigma ones were smaller. I wanted to use wider lenses. The Canon ones were really big. They wouldn't fit with the follow focus, so I wanted to use the Sigma ones for utilitarian purposes. I've never. It could be a whole topic unto itself. I've never been able to fully comprehend the differences between brands of lenses, only focal length, and that's it. That's it.
The first time I became aware of it was so through my student days at UTS, our 16mm camera, our Sync Sound 16mm camera was kitted out with Zeiss lenses. I was helping out in lighting department on a music video that was using the same 16mm camera, but was using a 35mm Cook lens on it. And in those days, the only way you could get an image out to Video Village was, the whole kind of reflex idea. Remember we were talking about reflex cameras as opposed to mirrorless cameras,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right?
So wait. Oh, so those cameras have mirrors for viewfinders.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I
So
never considered that. So they are reflex cameras.
yeah. So to get an image out to Video Village, there was a prism where the ground glass would be for a viewfinder, which would split half the light from the mirror into the optical viewfinder, and half the light would go to a tiny little pinhole camera. And that camera then would send image out to video split.
Oh, I
So
didn't even know you could get a live feed into a video village until digital cameras came to being. That's new.
no, it's very, very old, is what it is.
Huh. Wow. I'd never considered that. I've always just thought, oh, they just
Yeah,
winged it back
I
then.
I cheated one with so our film cameras at UTS didn't have a video split. Hence why it's called
Hmm.
video split, because it's splitting the image, one to the viewfinder, one to the
Oh,
video.
okay. Yeah.
So our cameras didn't have video split, and I wanted to use a remote head on a jib for a particular shot. So
Mm-hmm.
I stuck a security camera in the viewfinder and ended
What
up
did they
with
think of
like,
that? Was that
if that was the video monitor, then I ended up with an image like that in the middle. That was the actual frame. So I was with my joystick. Director's going, how we go?
doesn't really quite work? Doesn't really quite work in the context of your cinematic style, I don't think. It's the complete
But
inverse. This
in
is
any case,
Kim's
the
pinprick style.
the point being that even with the best of video splits at the time was standard definition,
Mm.
and not really full standard definition at that.
Because they weren't capturing, like they
No,
were tiny. They were
not the
minuscule
such,
when
but
being
like
magnified. Is that why?
this was before HD.
Oh shit! Right. No, of course. Yeah. But okay. Yeah. Good point.
And then, tiny little camera. The whole point being that it wasn't a particularly good quality image that you got out of a video split.
No.
It was for guidance purposes, framing purposes only. But I remember walking on set, turning a corner, out of the corner of my eye, seeing Video Village. And even then, I think we had a 15-inch monitor on set. So about like a laptop screen. So from half a room away, watching out of the corner of my eye that standard def split image, I was just like, even from that distance, I could really feel like I was seeing an image in a glass block. Like a really dense, thick block of glass. There's a physicality and tangibility to that itself as opposed to what you're seeing through it. Like, a really high quality block of glass.
I haven't really stumbled across many blocks of glass in my lifetime.
And so that, yeah, as first kind of like, oh, what's that lens? And it was kind of that little nudge, nudge, shake, shake. Now you're on the inside. It's
Ah,
a cook.
right.
Oh.
Okay.
So that's another one you see.
Damn.
And I think that's a big part of it, that the
Hmm.
roundness is something that is associated with the cook look.
Oh, okay. I remember going on the Cook website, and that's just
Mm.
like emblazoned all over the damn thing. Like the
Hmm.
first thing you see is the Cook look.
Hmm.
No clue what that meant, but okay.
A
So,
big part of the cook look is the roundness.
so in a way, okay. Let me try to summarize. So, while we're talking about what informs your choice of like focal length, there's obviously a lot of things. You're also actually thinking about roundness, which is more informed by
Well, I mean,
the brand.
it's about the same thing, because for me,
Yeah.
focal length choice is about space.
What would you say is your priority? Do you have a priority in that regard? Do you have like a
What do you mean?
how do I say this? How important is roundness to you? If you were given that and like the choice between this is going to be way too hypothetical. Sorry. How, just very simply, how
So,
important
so,
is
so, so
roundness
to
to you?
to put it extreme, if
Mm.
I'm given the choice of no lens or a lens with poor roundness, what would my
Yes,
choice
right.
be?
Yeah.
It would
Obviously one with the
be
poor
the
roundness.
lens with poor roundness, yeah.
Yeah,
If I'm
yeah,
given the
okay.
choice of a lens with good roundness versus a lens with less roundness and no lunch, it'll make it a lot more tricky. If it was a multi-day
Okay.
shoot, then yeah, I'd probably go lunch.
Okay. All right.
If it's a choice between a lens with better roundness and a lens with less roundness but more lighting logistics, i.e., crew and
Mm,
rigging,
mm,
depends on the
mm.
circumstances.
I know what I'm going to say now. Because we're talking about focal length, how much does like what's your first thought in the process? Are you thinking obviously there's not much of an order to these things because they all overlap so much. Are you thinking more about roundness or more about focal length? What's your or are those just so
Uh,
intertwined that there's no
it,
separation between the
it
two of them? It's all
so
about
it
volume.
tends to be that this is a kind of a mechanical optical design principle.
Hmm.
And so generally, if a manufacturer kind of likes the roundness, that's how they design every lens,
Right.
to varying degrees. So it's kind of like, once you've established, am I going more or less round lenses, then it's there
Hmm.
or it's not. And yeah, then focal length is generally not much into the extremes,
Hmm. Hmm.
because of kind of like the design destination in my mind of a bigger screen. I generally don't go much wider than a 35 on Super 35 sensor.
I think
At that point, it
because
starts getting a bit wide for me.
I think
Uh,
I've only because I'm at like a an entry level. I was obviously I'm like I spent so long learning the absolute basics of what a lens does. I've like only used the extremes. I love my extremes because I just love the effect it has. I'm still at the area where like I think subtlety isn't very easy for me because I'm not quite skilled enough for it yet. So if I want something to be weird and abrasive, I'll go 14 mil, wonderful, because it just looks weird. And I don't know if people able to make things look weird if they don't, if without that lens, because I don't know how else to. You know, I'm still at that stage, I think.
how weird is weird? How weird
Yeah.
does it, for any given moment, let's say
Mm,
that weird is kind of what we're gunning for any given moment, how weird does it need to be?
yeah. And I was like on my on the short on Converse, the go was very weird. That was the go was like make the audience watch this and go, this is just strange. This is no like kind of walking out and going like that was a bit weird. Like watching it and going, this is fucking strange and like kind of screwed up. That was the go, like very, very weird. And that was why we were like, let's imitate. Let's what's the word? Let's hero worship and imitate our favorite weird guy, which at the time was Terry Gilliam.
Yeah, I think for me, again, it's more about, for me, it's about that space. Yeah, so I kind of generally fall pretty much within the standard set.
Do you use it in a traditional range, or you said you were more inclined to be inverted? You
Yeah,
said,
yeah.
yeah. Do you have a go-to?
Uh,
Do you have like a go-to? Do you have like a go-to range, go-to brand?
Depends on the space, and by that I mean the physical space.
Yeah.
As in, how much space do I have available? Because obviously, with an inverted lens plan, if you want wider shots, then you need more space because you can be pulling back on a long lens.
Can I give you a hypothetical then,
Mm-hmm.
if I can? You've been asked to shoot a short film that's set in one location. We've spoken about those shorts that are shot in like a garage that are supposed to be a spaceship, like the small scale sci-fi stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Some guy wants you to shoot one of those shorts. He wants, like an intimate character study set in a abandoned spaceship cabin, which is just the guy's garage. What's your what's your go? Sensor size, lens, brand,
See, this is one of
or do
those
you need
questions that,
more
again,
information?
like my gut reaction is,
How boring.
yeah, what kind of question is this? As in, I mean, I guess part of it for me is kind of like actually, it's really interesting. A huge deja vu moment for myself.
Mm.
Having chances to meet famous or semi-famous cinematographers and asking questions, and now kind of flipping the script and kind of go, what must they have been thinking when I asked that
They're going,
question?
wow, what a boring question. Okay, I'll give you
No,
my
but
shitty
sorry.
beginner.
The reason I'm
Yeah.
saying that is that
Mm.
my gut instinct answer is, well, I do me, you do you. Go and try it.
Can I tell you what I would do then? Okay, we're being utilitarian here. Let's say the space is the same size as my room. So not very big, right? Full frame, if applicable, if gettable. Probably it's low budgets, maybe not. But like in a perfect world, full frame. So I capture a fair amount of space. I would probably stick to 50 when I could, if it was mostly MCUs and medium shots. And then for close-ups, I would 35, nothing more. Like I think I would use
Okay,
an inverted plan.
let me ask you this then.
Mm,
When you say close up, do you mean an actual
mm.
close up, as in that kind of thing?
The shot size, yeah, not the
Yeah.
proximity to the person.
Because if it, a 35 on a full frame, I'm on a 17 on a full frame here now. No, sorry, on an APC sensor here right now. So this is a medium
Hmm.
close up, right?
I think I'm on APC as well. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. If yours is an
Mm.
ATD, that would be an APC as well. Front of the lens is half my arm away.
Okay. All of my arm away at the moment.
So I'm not talking a sensor, I'm talking to the front of the lens.
Front of the lens, it's at my wrist, like where my wrist starts.
So
Mm.
with that, at a certain point, sorry, just gonna confirm that I'm actually on 17 millimeters. So that would be roughly equivalent to 25 on a full frame.
Right. Yeah, I'm checking my.
So if you want a
Okay.
close up, if you want a proper close up, so yours is about the equivalent to a 35 on a full frame. If you want a proper close up, you would need to move closer, right?
Yep.
So let's find out how much closer.
Okay. Oh man.
And a smidge closer, I'd say, for a proper close up. Okay, yeah, so about there we're talking. Now, how close are you?
About half a meter from my camera. Hi guys, welcome to
But
my
but more of the question is,
tourism vlog.
how close are you to the front of the lens?
A foot, maybe?
So one A4 sheet of paper, roughly.
Mm, mm, mm.
Now throw a matte box on that.
I see your point. Yeah, no, that would suck.
Then where's the tripod gonna go?
Right up against the main character, right up on their feet.
So at a certain point, it's only so wide you can get. I mean, I would imagine that a lot of the behind the scene footage from Fear and Loathing is in Las Vegas is with Johnny Depp's head being almost inside the matte box on. This is really bad. Can't remember the name of the cinematographer now.
I
Nicola.
literally I should know his name. I did a thing on him. But that was the case for our short. Like in the
Yeah.
14 mil close-ups that we used, he literally had to like not breathe when he filmed those because otherwise he'd breathe on the lens.
Okay, and also then, how do you like that close up?
Poorly. Yeah, no, I stood. It was outside. I stood in like the only spot where the sun was, and like just kind of directed this like gold bounce at him. And it kind of worked, but it like the inevitable part of shooting that close is that it always darkens like the forehead and like one side of the face. It's really annoying.
Again, I think part of it is try to build yourself a visual library. And I think that rather than kind of go about it completely randomly, give yourself some structure. And by that I mean, I'm going to take today, I'm going to go 14 millimeters and I'm going to go every single shot size on a 14 millimeter.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Could I do that with this zoom lens? Like, could
Well,
I?
that you would have 14 millimeters on there.
18. Damn it.
So whatever that is, but I would also say stick with the standard set. For example, if your lens starts at 18, then yeah, every single shot size at 18 millimeter. Then go every single shot size at 24 or 25, every single shot size at 32 or 35 or whatever. And try and do that in different spaces.
I might do that with Ken today. I'll get Ken standing up on my desk.
Oh, yeah, no, you're not going to be able to. At least not for the wider focal lengths, because you're going to hit minims. You're not going to be able to
shit.
focus
No,
close enough.
Won't be able to focus. Yeah. Great. Okay. I might just put a folder on my desktop now to remind me to do that. Give me a sec.
And then again, like I said, for me, it helped enormously to kind of fall on more or less a structure and philosophy, and if that makes sense, by just watching something like 500 pics or Flickr and going like, yeah, I like that space, and keep track of the metadata.
I do that as well. I think 500 pics also has a lot of like just shots of locations and things as opposed to just people. And I think that's kind of something I struggle with.
No, but like there's a search function.
That's a really good point.
So literally a lot of what I did was just go to 500 pics, search cinematic, and go from there.
Sweet. Okay, so our general conclusion on focal length is
that there is no conclusion. Come to
your
your own
out.
conclusion.
Figure it out for yourself. Yeah.
Sorry.
Do your own visual library. Do your research. You're on your own. Watch something. If you like it, who cares? Figure out what your look is. Figure out what you're going for, and then make a 3 terabyte large visual library file on your computer that will crash every single time you open your computer.
Also known as
the go-to.
Pinterest.
Also known as Pinterest. Oh shit! I just don't use. I sound like I don't use the internet right now. This is just you didn't know that Pinterest and search functions existed.
Well, did you know that? Did you know that that's my just to give myself a heads up that we're getting close to the time limit on the meeting. Did you know that Pinterest has did you know that Pinterest has a 200,000 pin limit per account? Did you know that Pinterest has a 500 board limit per account?